"I want the most expensive room," said the little girl to the luxury hotel manager, but he scoffed at the girl, promising that if she could pay for the cheapest room, he'd let her live there for free. Then the girl opens her suitcase and discovers something shocking. Comment giving my story a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The click-clack of high heels echoed through the marble lobby of the most luxurious hotel in the bustling metropolis. But it wasn't the elegant steps of a socialite that drew attention. It was a little girl, 4 years old, so small and fragile she looked barely 2, dragging a battered suitcase almost her size. Her unkempt hair contrasted sharply with the opulence of the surroundings, where crystal chandeliers hung from the soaring ceiling and gilded mirrors reflected the richness of every detail. The child stopped before the imposing reception desk, her large eyes observing the middle-aged man who was staring at her with disdain. The manager, with his perfectly trimmed mustache and impeccable suit, couldn't hide his annoyance at seeing such an out-of-place figure in his elite establishment. "I want the most expensive room you have," said the girl with a firm voice that belied her vulnerable appearance. The man let out a booming laugh that echoed through the lobby, causing some guests to turn and observe the unusual scene. Staff members whispered amongst themselves, some with malicious smiles, others with expressions of discomfort at the embarrassing situation. "Kid, are you lost? Where are your parents?" asked the manager, still chuckling. "This isn't a playground. I'm not playing," she replied, lifting her chin slightly. "I can pay." The man leaned over the counter, bringing his face close to hers with a cruel smirk. "You know what I'm going to do? If you can pay for our cheapest room, I'll let you live here for free for the rest of your life. How's that sound?" He expected her to run away, ashamed. Some employees snickered quietly, anticipating the humiliation to come. But the girl didn't budge. Instead, with small but determined hands, she opened the rusty clasps of the suitcase. The silence that followed was deafening. Stacks and stacks of bills were meticulously organized inside the old luggage. $100 bills, 50s, some gold coins that shimmered under the chandelier lights. The money seemed endless, layers upon layers of fortune hidden in that suitcase that no one had taken seriously. The arrogant manager felt the blood drain from his face. His hands trembled as he straightened up, trying to process what he was seeing. The employees stopped laughing, some covering their mouths with their hands in genuine shock. I, the man stammered, lost between disbelief and embarrassment. "The most expensive room," repeated the girl, closing the suitcase with the same calm with which she had opened it. "Please." At that moment, everyone in the lobby understood that they were witnessing something extraordinary. A child who carried not only enough money to buy the entire hotel, but also a determination that made adults feel small. In the days that followed, the girl settled into the presidential suite as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She greeted the staff politely, ordered simple meals from room service, and spent hours on the balcony watching the city bustle below. Her discreet but constant presence generated whispers and speculation throughout the corridors. It was during one of these afternoons that the 30-year-old businessman, with a handsome face, who frequented the hotel for business meetings, noticed her for the first time. He was at the downstairs bar, reviewing contracts involving millions in investments and stock market shares, when his eyes fixed on the small figure walking alone through the lobby. There was something in her posture that intrigued him. It wasn't the natural curiosity of a child exploring a new place, but a deep melancholy that he recognized in himself. It was as if she carried an invisible weight, a loneliness that transcended her young age. Over the next few weeks, he began to observe her discreetly. The girl had specific routines. She woke up early, had breakfast on the balcony, went down to the garden where she fed the birds with breadcrumbs, and spent the rest of the day drawing or reading books she seemed to have brought in the suitcase along with the money. The mystery surrounding her grew every day. Where did so much wealth come from? Why was such a small child alone? And most importantly, why had she chosen exactly this hotel when she could have gone anywhere in the world with the fortune she possessed? The questions had no answers, but one thing was certain. The presence of that mysterious girl was changing something fundamental in the atmosphere of the place, and especially in the heart of a man who had long forgotten what it was like to feel genuine compassion for someone. 3 weeks had passed since the mysterious girl's arrival, and the hotel had become accustomed to her quiet presence. It was a sunny morning when she went down to the gardens, as she did every day, carrying small pieces of bread for the birds. The businessman was on the balcony of his suite, pretending to read financial reports about his investments in cryptocurrency, but actually observing her routine. That's when he heard a desperate meow coming from the bushes near the fountain. The girl also heard it, and without hesitation ran towards the sound. Among the foliage, an orange cat was huddled, with a visibly injured paw and fur matted with dirt. "Hey, kitty," she whispered, crouching down slowly. "Are you hurt?" The animal tried to move away, but she extended her hand patiently, allowing it to sniff her before touching it. With delicate movements, she picked it up, completely ignoring the fact that her expensive clothes would get dirty. The businessman watched everything from the balcony, feeling something strange stir in his chest. How long had it been since he had seen someone demonstrate such genuine compassion? He quickly came downstairs and approached. "He needs a vet," she said, looking up at the tall man approaching. "I know someone," he replied, surprised at his own willingness to help. "We can take him now." At the veterinary clinic, while they waited, they talked for the first time for real. She said she had always liked animals, but had never been able to have one. He mentioned that he used to have a dog as a child before his parents passed away in an accident. "You lost your parents too?" she asked, with a frankness that disarmed him. He nodded, unable to lie in the face of those sincere eyes. "A long time ago. Mine are gone too," she said simply. "But I have to be strong, like my grandma always said." When they returned to the hotel with the cat bandaged and medicated, the staff greeted them with genuine smiles. The chambermaid, who always muttered about strange children, now offered homemade cookies. The doorman, who used to frown, waved happily. The girl's compassion had touched everyone. It was that same week that she surprised the hotel's financial advisor. The man had offered to help her organize her resources, assuming that a child wouldn't understand anything about money. How surprised he was when she started asking questions about investments, dividends, and compound interest. "If I invest this amount in fixed income funds, what would the annual return be?" she asked, pointing to a figure on the paper. The consultant blinked several times, adjusting his glasses. You know what fixed income funds are?" "My grandma taught me," she replied naturally. "She said money sitting around is money wasted." The businessman who had offered to accompany the meeting was impressed. At 4 years old, she demonstrated a financial knowledge that many adults did not possess. More than that, she spoke about assets with a naturalness that suggested a very specific education. But not everything was peaceful. During the 4th week, an elegant woman appeared at the hotel reception. She wore an expensive dress, discreet but valuable jewelry, and spoke with the authority of someone who was used to being obeyed. Her hair was perfectly styled, but there was something cold in her dark eyes. "I'm looking for my stepdaughter," she said to the manager. "A little girl, 4 years old. I have reason to believe she's staying here." The manager, still embarrassed by the initial situation with the child, hesitated. "Ma'am, we have privacy policies." "I'm the only family she has," insisted the woman, her voice laden with a concern that seemed rehearsed. "The poor child ran away from home after a silly argument. Imagine how desperate I am." She showed documents proving she was the girl's legal guardian, old photographs that actually showed the two together, and even a police report about the disappearance. Everything seemed legitimate, but there was something in her tone of voice that made the manager feel uncomfortable. "I'll check," he finally said. When the businessman heard about the visit, he felt a knot in his stomach that he couldn't explain. He found the girl in the garden, playing with the cat who was now recovered, and told her about the woman who was looking for her. Her face paled instantly. Her small hands began to tremble, and she hugged the cat tightly, as if it were her only protection. "She's not my real family," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. She doesn't want what's best for me." "What do you mean?" he asked, crouching down to her height. "When Mum and Dad passed away, she said she would take care of me, but she just wanted Grandma's money. When she found out the inheritance was only mine, she got very angry." The businessman felt anger rise in his chest. "What kind of inheritance?" "Grandma was very rich," explained the girl between sobs. "She had a big company, lots of real estate, but she didn't like Dad because he married Mum, who was poor. But before she passed, Grandma left everything to me in her will. And this woman knows that." The girl nodded. "She tried to get the money many times. She said I was too young, that I didn't know how to manage assets. But Grandma's lawyer explained that the inheritance would only be mine when I grew up, and until then it would be kept safe. So how do you have access to the money now?" "Grandma left a special amount for my education and care. It was hidden at home, in a secret place that only I knew." She wiped away the tears with the back of her hand. "I took everything and ran away because I was scared." The businessman then understood the magnitude of the situation. It wasn't just a rich child making whims. It was an orphaned girl running away from someone who saw her only as a source of profit. And now that person had found her. That night, while the girl was sleeping, he couldn't close his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt responsible for someone other than himself. But he was also afraid of getting attached, afraid of losing someone else who was starting to mean something to him. What he didn't know was that downstairs, the elegant woman was talking in a low voice with a lawyer on the phone, planning a strategy to regain control over the fortune she considered her rightful property. The morning brought with it a tense atmosphere that seemed to permeate every corridor of the hotel. The businessman woke up early, unable to sleep, after discovering the truth about the girl the night before. When he went down for breakfast, he found her sitting alone at a table near the window, listlessly pushing her food around while watching the birds in the garden. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, sitting down next to her. She shook her head negatively. "I had nightmares about her. I always do when she's around." Before he could respond, the manager approached the table with an embarrassed expression. "Excuse me for interrupting, but the lady who was here yesterday has returned. She's insisting on talking to the girl and, well, she brought a lawyer." The businessman's blood ran cold. "Where are they?" "In the private meeting room. They said it's an urgent legal matter." The girl shrank into her chair, her eyes filling with tears. "She's going to take me away, isn't she?" "I won't let that happen," he said, surprising himself with the firmness of his voice. "You stay here with me." In the meeting room, the elegant woman was seated next to a man in a dark suit, both with serious expressions as they examined documents spread out on the mahogany table. When the businessman entered with the girl, she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My darling," she exclaimed, extending her arms. "You worried me so much. Mommy was desperate looking for you." The girl hid behind the businessman, clinging to his clothes. "She's not my mom," she whispered. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Sir, I ask that you understand our position. This child is a minor and ran away from home. We have legal documents proving the guardianship of the lady present here. And I have reason to question the legitimacy of that guardianship," replied the businessman, standing firm. "On what authority?" asked the woman, her voice taking on a more aggressive tone. "You don't even know the girl." It was then that she made her first mistake. Besides, she continued, a 4-year-old child does not have the mental capacity to manage assets. It is obvious that she needs the supervision of a responsible adult. The businessman noticed how her eyes lit up when she mentioned assets. It wasn't motherly love that motivated her, but pure and simple greed. Sir, said the lawyer, the law is clear. The child must return home with her legal guardian. And if I object, then we'll have to resort to the competent authorities, threatened the man. In the days that followed, a silent battle began. The woman stayed at the hotel, claiming she wanted to be close to her daughter, while she resolved the situation amicably. But the businessman noticed how she watched the girl with calculating eyes, always asking about her playing with money and her grown-up games. It was during one of these tense conversations that he discovered something disturbing. He was passing by the hallway when he heard voices coming from the suite where the woman was staying. It can't be that much, said a male voice he recognized as belonging to the lawyer. You don't understand, she replied, annoyed. The old woman was a billionaire. She had investments in gold, euros, even Bitcoin. The inheritance is worth a fortune we can't even properly calculate. But the will is clear. The child will only have access to the main resources when she reaches adulthood. That's exactly why I need to regain guardianship. 18 years managing those assets, charging management fees. I'll be rich before she even grows up. The businessman felt nauseous. That woman saw the girl as nothing more than a revenue stream. He quietly walked away, but what he heard haunted him for the rest of the day. That night, he found the girl sitting on the balcony of her suite, looking at the stars. She seemed smaller and more fragile than ever. Can I tell you a secret? She asked. He sat down next to her. Sure. I chose this hotel on purpose, she said, her voice almost a whisper. It wasn't by chance. What do you mean? She ran to her room and returned carrying an old, ornate box. From inside, she took out a yellowed photograph that showed 2 young men smiling, arm in arm, in front of a building under construction. Recognize anyone? She asked. The businessman examined the photo more closely and felt the world spin around him. One of the men was clearly his father, decades younger, but unmistakable. The other... This is the grandpa I never met, said the girl. Dad's dad. Grandma kept this photo her whole life, even after they fell out. They were partners, he murmured, the memories flooding back like a tsunami. My father always talked about an old partner who walked away after a business dispute. He never said the name, but they built buildings together, she continued. Grandma said they were best friends until the day everything changed. Something about a woman and too much pride on both sides. The businessman felt the pieces of a huge puzzle starting to fall into place. That's why you came here. You knew who I was. I didn't know, she corrected. But Grandma always said that if I ever needed real help, I should look for the son of Grandpa's best friend. She kept newspaper clippings about your company, your achievements. She said you were the only person in the world who would understand our family. Tears streamed down his face now. All the loneliness, all the isolation he had built up over the years, crumbled before the revelation that their destinies were intertwined long before they met. But how did you know where to find me? The internet, she said with a shy smile. I searched your name and found out that you always have meetings here. So I took all the money I could and came to wait. Wait for what? To wait for you to be as good as Grandma always said your father was. At that moment, the businessman understood that it wasn't about coincidence or chance. It was destiny. 2 families separated by pride and misunderstandings, now reunited through a brave child and a man who had forgotten how to love. But the peace of the moment was interrupted by a loud knock on the door. When he opened it, he found the manager with a worried expression. Sir, I need to warn you. The girl's guardian has filed a lawsuit. Tomorrow, officers will come to pick up the child. She claimed that you are preventing a minor from returning to her legal family. The girl began to tremble. Is she going to be able to take me? The businessman looked at that child who had changed his life in a few weeks, who had shown him that there was still goodness in the world, who had connected his present to the past in a way he had never imagined possible. "No," he said, making a decision that would change them both forever. "I'm not going to let that happen." The law firm was silent in the early hours when the businessman made a call that would change everything. His fingers trembled as he dialed the number of his personal lawyer, a renowned man who had handled his investments and contracts for over a decade. "I need you to investigate everything about a guardianship," he said, wasting no time with greetings. "And when I say everything, I mean everything." While awaiting the results of the investigation, he spent the next 2 days practically glued to the girl. They had breakfast together, walked through the garden, and he listened to her tell stories about her grandmother, a strong woman who had built an empire from scratch, investing in land when the city was still small, buying stocks when no one believed in the growth of the financial market. "Grandma said that money without love is just paper," the girl said while drawing birds in a notebook. "She became very rich, but very lonely too. That's why she left everything to me so that I could do differently." It was on the afternoon of the second day that the phone rang. The businessman's lawyer had news that would make anyone's hair stand on end. "You're not going to believe what we found," said the man on the phone. "This woman is not a legal guardian at all. The documents are fake, very well forged, but fake." The businessman felt his heart race. "How so?" "She took advantage of the tragedy. When the girl's parents passed away in that accident, she simply showed up at the hospital, introduced herself as a close relative, and took custody of the child. Because she was in a state of shock, the girl didn't question it. And since there were no other known relatives, no one investigated further. So she kidnapped an orphaned child. Technically, yes, but there's more. We discovered that she worked as a secretary in the office of the lawyer who handled the grandmother's inheritance. She had access to privileged information about the will and decided to take advantage of the situation." The businessman clenched his fists, feeling a rage he hadn't experienced in years. "What about the actual inheritance?" "That's even more impressive. The girl's grandmother wasn't just rich, she was one of the most powerful women in the country. Owner of a hotel chain, investor in gold and foreign currencies, she even had a portfolio of bitcoins worth millions today. Her net worth easily reached into the billions. And all of that goes to the girl. When she turns 18, yes, but there's an interesting clause in the will. If she finds a family who truly loves her before adulthood, she can have access to the resources early, under judicial supervision." That night, the businessman called the girl for a serious conversation. They sat on the balcony, watching the city lights that spread out like terrestrial stars. "I need to tell you something about your situation," he began. "The woman who claims to be your guardian, she lied about everything." The girl didn't seem surprised. "I knew something was wrong. She never looked at me the way mothers look at their children." "You won't have to go back with her," he said, holding her small hands. "But that means we're going to have to face a legal battle." "What if I lose? What if they send me to live somewhere bad?" The businessman took a deep breath, knowing he was about to make the most important decision of his life. "That's not going to happen, because I'm going to ask to be your legal guardian." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of hope. "Really? Really? If you want to, of course." She threw herself into his arms, and for the first time in years, he felt he had a purpose greater than simply accumulating wealth. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal activity. Lawyers met constantly, documents were presented, investigations were deepened. The false guardian, realizing that her deceit had been discovered, tried to flee the city, but was intercepted by the authorities at the airport. During one of the hearings, the full truth finally came to light. The woman confessed that she had planned everything from the moment she learned of the existence of the inheritance. She had even caused the accident that resulted in the passing of the girl's parents, tampering with the brakes on their car. The judge, an elderly man with decades of experience, was visibly shaken by the confession. In 40 years of career, I have rarely seen so much cruelty driven by greed, he said. The girl, who was watching everything from the witness stand, showed no anger or desire for revenge. Instead, she looked at the woman who had stolen her childhood and said simply, "I hope you find peace someday." The emotional maturity of that 4-year-old child impressed everyone in the room. Weeks later, when all the legal procedures were resolved, the businessman received official guardianship of the girl. But something still bothered him. The emotional isolation he had built up over the years made him question whether he would be able to be the father she deserved. It was then that she showed him something that would change his perspective forever. It was a letter written by her grandmother shortly before passing that had been kept with the inheritance. "To whoever takes care of my dear granddaughter," the letter read in elegant handwriting, "know that she doesn't need wealth. She needs love. The money was just a way to ensure that she would find someone willing to see her for who she really is. A special child who can change the world if given the chance. Grandma always said that I would find my real family," explained the girl. "She said family isn't blood, it's choice." At that moment, the businessman understood that his own healing journey had begun the day she appeared at the hotel. The loneliness he had carried since the loss of his parents was being healed by the unconditional love of a child who had lost even more than him, but had chosen to forgive and move on. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. On the last day of the adoption process, the lawyer handed him a sealed envelope that had been left by the grandmother specifically for the man who chose to love my granddaughter. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a revelation that would leave him speechless. The girl's grandmother had known his father much better than anyone imagined. They weren't just business partners. They were great loves who separated due to pride and family misunderstandings. The girl was, in fact, his distant cousin, and that whole journey had been carefully orchestrated by a wise woman who, even after leaving this world, had found a way to reunite two families that fate had separated decades ago. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.